podcasting with Jim Crowell today. Jim is the CEO of OPEX, and he has a background in finance, economics, and MBA. So he's basically a consummate suit, a manipulative market timing capitalist. As we get into a little bit in this discussion, Jim also does have a background as a CrossFit gym owner, as well as a CrossFit Games athlete on the OPEX team, and as an individual himself a few times at regionals. But as CEO of OPEX, he's essentially, leading a market creating force in terms of trying to figure out how to make personalized fitness a market offering for people, meaning individualized program design with a coach, which is a pretty fascinating discussion in terms of trying to figure out how to make the market actually realize that it needs something it doesn't quite know exists yet. And in a conversation outside of this podcast, I believe Jim and I were actually talking about how, he's always trying to figure out what is the real game being played. And that's a question that I think is, very, very interesting when you start to get down into what's actually going on there. So, Jim, widely read, fit human, smart dude. Hope you like this one. All right, so here with Jim Crowell, who I first encountered on the CrossFit Journal many, many years ago. In a facility that had graffiti on the wall and some sort of baseball related activities happening, and then I actually met this man in person at an OPEX CCP course, which seems like a long time ago. And now you've gone from having people do CrossFit with graffiti and turf to being the the CEO of OPEX. What the hell? What's that all about?
Yeah, I mean. To take people back, the graffiti wall and, what Todd's talking about is what I think they called CrossFit cribs back in the day, where CrossFit brought in videographers to just take videos and to understand a day in the life of their gyms. And so, God, this must have been 2011 or 12 that this probably happened. And then a year later, I probably would have met you at the OPEX course. We had two gyms that were up and running. We were really successful in Pittsburgh. And
can you do a Pittsburgh accent?
Yins guys, not really, to be honest with you, because I'm not born and raised there. So I'm a mutt all over the country.
Go Steelers.
But so it was going really well, and then I kind of found this OPT, now OPEX thing, and James and everybody around it, and really fell in love with sort of this principled approach to training and coaching, and sold my gyms to my business partner and ended up moving down here to be a coach. And I kind of always tell the story the same way. It's like 3 months into coaching here, I knew I had to be on the business side. There was just a lot of things that we needed to do, and I thought that I could be helpful, and just kind of moved my way into that role and have kind of just helped to build it ever since.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we were talking about this a bit before recording, but a lot of coaches get into the fitness industry with the intention of coaching and, making a difference in people's lives and all that kind of stuff. And that then many quickly find out that the reality of making a difference in people's lives involves succeeding in business, not necessarily knowing how to write prescriptions and reps and sets and all that kind of stuff. So it sounds like you potentially had some insight there. And
yeah, I mean, I've been a coach since I was 14 or 15. I used to coach little kids playing baseball and soccer and the whole 9 yards. But my formal training is I have a double major in finance and economics from Penn State. And then I was a hedge fund trader for 5 years and have subsequently got my MBA from North Carolina. So it's like, I definitely come with a different perspective than many gym owners, which is good in some ways and bad in some ways. But when I viewed building a gym, I viewed it as capitalism. I viewed it as I need to build this thing because somebody else is going to build it if I don't. And that's not to say that I was negative to anybody around me. It's just to say that I wanted to build a business and have clients and succeed and have my coaches succeed. And I think that too many coaches do this either out of passion or they do it with no comprehension of what it takes to really run a business, particularly in today's climate when you face $500,000 invested Orange Theories that are pumping $25K a month into advertising. So you aren't going to compete well against that if you aren't really, really good on how you service your clients. particularly in, these micro gyms, CrossFit gyms, personal training studios. You just have to be better than these other gyms or you're dead.
Yeah. And it's not even just the other gyms you're competing with either, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're competing with other micro gyms, but you're also competing with Peloton. You're competing with free workout videos on YouTube. You're competing with laziness.
Yeah, big time.
Inertia.
Yeah, I mean, I gave a presentation a couple weeks ago, and the obesity statistics, we might think that we're playing a game that's really helping the world, and yet people are becoming more obese every year.
Yeah, I mean, we're just like sharpening the spear for people who are already working out.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is kind of sad to think about, where you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to like help all these people. It's like, they were going to be fit anyway, probably.
Exactly. They're already motivated in some capacity. Yeah. So I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think that there's a great idea where if more people are getting fit, there's more awareness around it. So I think that that's good. But, and I've certainly, as you have, I've seen countless transformations using fitness, but no doubt about it, the trend is not moving in our direction globally. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of, getting into the fitness business, was that, you said, I mean, to you it was capitalism, right? I mean, straight up like, all right, this is a great opportunity. Yeah. Did you have a passion for coaching initially? Or was that developed over time? Almost like the opposite story of the typical coach who comes in, like loves coaching, and then it's like, oh man, I better figure out this business thing.
It's I felt like I didn't feel like I was out of place at the hedge fund. I enjoyed it. I had success with it. I learned a ton, but I've always felt the most comfortable in some kind of coaching capacity, whether that be at the high school level. I was a collegiate tennis player, so I coached a ton of tennis back in the day. I was always the guy who was helping our, in a fraternity, right? Like teaching the pledges what to do. And even when I got into CrossFit, I really enjoyed the thought process behind, working out hard and doing things that are interesting movement wise. But I loved the idea of working. I actually originally worked with kids in CrossFit back in the day when I was in Austin, Texas, and I was with CrossFit Central for a couple of months before I moved up to Pittsburgh. But I loved the idea of helping people progress. And so I kind of had the unique interest in both the business side and the coaching side. And so for me, it was a pretty easy transition, but I've had to learn a tremendous amount in both, right? So I didn't know how to coach fitness per se. I had coached athletics my whole life, but coaching fitness was a completely different idea, particularly when you start talking about moving fast with heavy weight. So there's a lot of interesting things that you can learn there. And on the business side, I really had to, you said this earlier, but sharpen the spear in terms of I was not formally trained at all in marketing and sales and process work. I was more finance economics. So
sure, which I think a lot of people think of that as like, oh yeah, like finance and economics. Like, oh, you know business. And it's like, well, no,
not at all. Right?
Yeah. It's so I mean, maybe give a quick background then, as far as So I think another thing that people maybe don't fully understand, I also don't fully understand, when you work for a hedge fund, like literally, what are you doing? Like, are you sitting there and you're like, sell?
Yeah,
buy.
Kind of. Yeah. So I was a crude oil, natural gas, and gasoline and heating oil trader. So I was literally speculating in the market based off of what the prices of those were going to do. If I was right, we made money. If I was wrong, we lost money. And
are you like developing algorithms, or are you?
So I wasn't an algorithmic trader. We certainly built some gray box trading, meaning, we had some systems that we developed that were beneficial, but we never did any type of black box trading or algorithmic trading at our fund. We traded longer term positions with bigger volume generally. But I was a fairly fast-paced trader, so a little bit less risk. So my alpha, which is a big term in hedge funds, I had a really good alpha. So low risk, higher reward was kind of my MO. So I didn't make as much outright money as other people, but I always made money.
Sure.
That was kind of my shtick. But I was just trying to understand if the prices were going up or down. And then, we traded spreads as well, which was basically to say, is the nearer term contract, so maybe like March 2019 crude oil, because these are futures contracts, is that contract going to go up as compared to March 2020? And so you can play these different games. Honestly, they were games in the trading world with what the prices are going to do. And if you were good, you made a lot of money. And if you were bad, you got fired.
Yeah. So probably safe to say that you were keeping up with the activities of OPEC at the time.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So the oil and petroleum exporting countries, is that correct? Cool.
Yep.
And now you work for OPEX.
Right. Yep.
What's the connection there?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. They send me to the Middle East twice a year just to make sure we're good. No, I'm just kidding. No connection, but it's unbelievable how many people pronounce our name as OPEC.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yesterday,
interesting. Do you think that's because of the fact that they're aware that OPEC is a thing?
Yes.
Okay. So it's just like, it's a thing that exists. This kind of looks like it. Circuits get crossed and it just gets hooked.
Yeah, cool. I really do. I mean, I think there's just a complete unawareness about it.
Awesome. What are you going to do to remedy your brand's image in the public pronunciation eye?
Actually, it's interesting. The more we work with our gyms, the more the X becomes more pronounced in terms of not only the pronunciation, but also connection to exercise, connection to experience. So the more that we can get people saying those words connected to OPEX, the more that people just pronounce it that way. So we actually have thought about that.
All right, cool.
That's a good question.
All right, cool. So anyway, to kind of circle back, I mean, we were talking a little bit about hedge funds and economics and finance, which is on a totally different scale than operating a business, where it's like, now I need to like look someone in the eye and say, hello, I can help you. Please give me your credit card.
Yeah, it is totally different. And I think that some coaches or small business owners get wrapped up in these macro statistics and economic terminology that, unless we're in some big recession like 2008, simply doesn't matter. Yeah. You know, the way that you're going to win in a local business is to build better relationships to not only your clients, but also people around you. And to, you know, I just always say the buying cycle, right? Like, create visibility, create interest from that visibility, turn it into a decision, and then serve them epically effectively once they've bought. It's like, if you do that really, really well and you keep refining each part of that, you're going to win, because we're not running complex businesses. You know, training people is simple. And that's not a shot to any of us. It's simple, right? You know, from a business standpoint, we're not using crazy technology. We're not building out very complex things. Our clients aren't paying us $1 million a year for government contracts. You know, we don't take insurance. It's like, it's simple. If we do our jobs and we help people get fit, they pay us more and they refer their friends. End of the day. But I think that too many business owners are hearing things like jobless numbers and GDP, and they're like, "Oh, is this good or bad?" Or like, "What's Trump doing?" And, you know, it's like, and they just get too engrossed in it. It just doesn't matter. At the local level, as long as we're not melting to the ground as an economy, people will buy. You know, and we are, particularly in the U.S. and Canada, we are in a much better situation than many African countries, many Asian countries, etc. And so we're lucky enough that people can buy our things and pay us $150 to $500 a month for fitness. You know, so unless the world is melting down in the United States, they're going to buy fitness. And increasingly so in the last 15 years, it's not a hockey stick up in terms of momentum, but fitness is getting bigger and stronger every year. So we'll have a recession in the next couple of years. There's almost no doubt about it. But as long as it's not catastrophic, people are going to keep buying.
Yeah. So in terms of discussing, I guess, like the state of the fitness market, which, you know, I mean, based upon this conversation may or may not be relevant, right? Like, getting too worried about, you know, how much of a share of the overall fitness market, you know, a micro gym has versus like a larger big box gym versus an at-home workout program. You know, does that actually matter for gym owner A who's trying to get people through their door? Probably not, and they probably have better things that they can focus on. But I do think it's interesting to think about, I guess, like the overall size of the pie in terms of like, okay, what's actually happening? Is it bad that there's more entrance into this area, right? That there are, you know, Orange Theories and other boot camp style programs, that there are CrossFit gyms, and then there's OPEX gyms, and then there's small group personal training gyms. You know, does each of those pieces actually subtract from those around it, or does that potentially increase the overall size of the market, and then just facilitate serving a bigger population, because now there's more niches, which then serves the overall ecosystem, even if it does maybe short-term take a few clients from someone.
Yeah. I hope that people replay what you just said, because there's some gold in what you just said. In in my opinion, you do have to understand size of the market. You do have to have a large enough addressable market to have a business, right? So let's say that you were selling $1 million gold bars and you were in a third world country who doesn't have any money. It's like, you're probably not going to sell too many bars, right? So you do have to understand that from a target demographic. However, I think what's really interesting is when you start to break down specific categories of fitness. So I'm a huge believer that if you can be the leader of a specific category in your market, you can do very well even if there are other category leaders out there. So what do I mean by category? Well, let's just take OPEX, for example. I don't want to be a leader in group training at all. I want to be as far away from group training in terms of how the market views us as possible, because I want to be the category leader in personalized fitness. And notice I didn't say personal training. That's by design, right? Like, I want to own personalized fitness in that market, and I want to create what that means, which is not easy to do, to create a category. If I go into group training, now it's a category with some subsets, right? So I want intense group training. Well, do you mean Orange Theory? Do you mean F45? Do you mean Fit Body Boot Camp? Do you mean Cross? You see how, like, now they are truly starting to get saturated. So you can have subcategory leaders, but at some point you're just in the same part of the consumer's mind. And the moment that you're in the same part of the consumer's mind, your market gets smaller. And if you're not the leader, your brand will ultimately get beat out. You know, so in a local market, maybe you can make enough money to make a living, but as the macro global economy would look at it, you're not winning, right? So doesn't mean a local gym can't survive. It just means that you're probably not going to thrive and scale.
Yeah.
You know, so, but if you can own the category, now when people think of, oh, I want personalized fitness, there's only one answer. If somebody says, well, I want group training, there's 15 answers now. So what about that kind of group training do you own? And if you can't get to that point, you will ultimately get beat because these franchises are putting way more money into marketing than you are.
Yeah. Well, I think that something that you mentioned that, stood out to, even in a local market, there's still that like winner take all dynamic for the leader in a category.
Definitely.
Right. So even if we say, okay, we want, boot camp in this neighborhood, there may be 5 quote unquote boot camp gyms, but one of them, say there's 60 people who want boot camp, one of them is getting 45 to 50 of them.
Yes.
And then there's 4 other gyms that are fighting for 10 additional people.
And I can't remember the exact stats, so don't crucify me for this one, but it's something like the category leaders often end up with 80% of the market.
Yeah.
So you can ask yourself, well, how does that work when you start thinking about Apple versus maybe a Samsung phone? Apple honestly does control a sizable portion of their category of smartphone. But now you're starting to see new categories of smartphones emerge, i.e. Huawei and those different companies. Now it's like the cheap smartphone. So when you're thinking about your category of fitness, you have to ask yourself, what is your service offering that is unique? And so, unfortunately, too many gyms aren't unique. And that's unfortunately, I think, what some CrossFit owners have seen is that, well, if I've got 5 CrossFits in a very small area, how am I different than the other CrossFit? And so that has to be the same category. I don't care how you say you're different. CrossFit's on the door. CrossFit's your service offering. So now I'm competing with the same thing in the same category. Well, now what does it come down to? Maybe location, maybe hot towels, as James would say. It's like it's going to come down to something different, right? But in my opinion, I would rather try to build a business that can own a category in a local market, because that has a lot more staying power if I can create it, which is hard to do, but if I can then put a moat around it, meaning these other things are trying to get in, but they're not me. And if I can put the beachhead out there and become that, that's really, really powerful, which, by the way, CrossFit brilliantly did when it came to intense group training. Brilliantly, they did that.
Sure. And, well, I think that another question that sort of triggers for me, you're talking about personalized fitness as sort of the category that you want OPEX to fill, and you're trying to differentiate that from personal training. But personalized fitness is probably not a language that exists in the market.
Yep.
Right. And people will generally want to buy something that they know solves a problem for them. Right? I mean, we were even talking about this earlier today, just in some of our more detailed discussions on training, where it's like you want people to come in and train with intention. And, it's not enough to just tell them, oh, your training session should feel like this. The goal is to build this amount of volume or whatever. And maybe you're trying to build volume in ring muscle ups for a very specific reason, but they think their problem is that they can't squat enough. Like it,
exactly.
It's like, and it doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. Like they want to solve their squat problem. Mm-hmm. And you as a coach have to have an incredible amount of buy-in to be able to convince them that they don't have a squat problem if they think they do.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Right. So in your case, right, you're sort of trying to convince people, hey, you have a personalized fitness problem. Yeah. And they may or may not recognize that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I like the way that you work through the question too. It makes me think of 6 more things too. Yeah. I'm a big believer that communications and language is extremely important. So the specific words that we use and the images that we post for people will either help them or hurt them in the long run to understand what we're doing. So if I were to go out to a market and try to explain personalized fitness, I'm not going to try to explain it and say, well, what we offer is, an assessment with a consultation, and we do this BMW assessment, and then after that, you're going to get programming every day from a coach, and they're going to be behind the scenes, but you're going to have a coach on the floor. It's like lost, just gone. What I want to talk about, and let's assume that I'm trying to position myself closer to personal training as compared to group, which we happen to be doing. I want to go to that group of people and say, I have a cost-effective, more results-based personal training. And they're like, oh, interesting. What does that mean? And now I can start to have the question because I have their attention. But I have to get the audience's attention, to your point, by anchoring to something that they understand. If I just go into this nonsense about what our service is, they're going to be like, ugh, I don't know what that means. Now people understand group training, now they understand boot camp, and now they understand personal training. And even remote coaching or,
online coaching.
Yeah, online coaching, right?
Program design.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's a thing
that's
people
starting
know
to
of.
get traction in the CrossFit, maybe the bodybuilding world, right? Because
I think even outside of that, I mean, there's plenty of Instagram fitness influencers who are selling online programming.
Yeah, so. Exactly. So, but they are creating that opening in the market, right? So it's like, if I'm going to go, even let's just use remote coaching. If I'm going to go into remote coaching, I better have a wedge into a market that's not dominated by somebody. Now, like, let's be honest, right? Like, you can certainly go to the Facebook argument and say, well, Facebook was after MySpace. It's like, but Facebook did a lot different things than MySpace did, and they simplified the entire conversation. So in reality, Facebook was a different thing than MySpace was, even though they're both social media.
Yeah, I think that, do you ever read any of Ben Thompson's stuff?
I don't think so.
Stratechery? Oh, dude, I got to get you into this.
Yeah, I'd love to.
It's the best. It's so awesome. But he essentially really codified this concept that you're talking about with a lot of the current wave of tech companies, and their business model he calls aggregators, right? Which is different than social media, right? An aggregator is essentially, it's not a platform on which other people build. It essentially is sourcing content and putting it all in one place, right? Which is a different business model than social media. Social media is like, I want to connect with people, all that kind of stuff. Whereas an aggregator, in the case of Facebook, is like, we're going to take all of people's stuff that they would post online and aggregate it and deliver it in one spot. So there's one hub for all of this content, which in Facebook's case is free and user generated, and that results in them being able to then serve ads to that market, right? Or Netflix is also an aggregator, but they're actually paying for content and then selling subscriptions to people. But their model is essentially, we are the one spot where all of this stuff lives, and our role as a business is to aggregate it and deliver it to you with convenience.
Yep.
Right, which is like totally different than like, I want to have friends online.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think what we're seeing across the board as well is, I think we're going to have to add a layer to this category conversation, which is, it's the category for the audience. So I might be the best Netflix, right, for the millennial audience. And I'm just going to go off of like, Amazon might serve a different audience based on the way that they built the platform. So whether you call it a different category or simply a category for a different market, those really are two separate businesses that could both work. So in the fitness conversation, I might want to say, well, I'm going to go after our terminology, level 0. I want to go after people who have never trained, who are completely deconditioned and probably need rehabilitation. What's the best model to do that? And if you could create a model that isn't being done and speak very effectively to those people, theoretically, you should be able to grow a business there. But if you're going to do the same thing that a million other people are doing, now is where the market size has to come into the equation. And you're not going to own the category, but you might be able to fly on the coattails of a category that's growing. So for example, like right now, we're trying to build this thing called personalized fitness. It's going to take us years more to do it before people are like, oh yeah, that's just OPEX, but that's the idea that we want to create. And what happens when we start to get traction, it's going to do this, and 5 other brands are going to come in and they're going to be like, oh, well, we do this too. But if we've done a good enough job with the articulation, with the imagery, with the gyms that we have out there, OPEX will be the category leader and get 80% of the market share. That's the idea.
Yeah, I mean, competition is just a cost of doing business. It's not.
Exactly. And what we want, right? I'd love to have 5 other competitors go out there and build personalized fitness. I'd love to, because we have an education platform and a really robust gyms licensing program that these companies don't have. Mm-hmm. So if personalized fitness becomes a very well-known thing, the market size grows dramatically.
Yeah. Well, and also, if there are competitors that are succeeding, they're potentially serving an aspect of the market that you may not wish to serve as well.
Exactly.
Which isn't necessarily bad.
Exactly. And I think for so many business owners, I have this conversation, swear to God, 3 times a week with people outside of OPEX, people inside of OPEX. There is a misconception about defining your target market. And people are so afraid to get really clear on their target market because they're afraid that they're going to lose other people in their city. And it's just misguided because they're not speaking to anybody. And in social media today, it is all tribal. It's like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, for God's sakes now. They're trying to put you into buckets so that ultimately they want to feed you ads, but they're trying to put you into buckets so that you get content for that specific audience. And I think that gym owners, if they're not playing that game to a specific audience, they're going to just completely miss the boat.
Yeah, well, and I think that what also ends up happening is that if you are specific, then you're able to build a certain level of expertise within an audience. And then even people who aren't in that audience may still come to you then because they're aware of that expertise.
Exactly.
And that could be, in the fitness space, you can look at that as potentially people who are known for working with certain types of high level athletes, that may turn off some people, and that's totally fine. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, in the gym market in Chicago, we certainly have that reputation. Right. And does that actually, create any significant amount of business for us as far as training high level athletes? Like, no, not really. Like, it's a few people who are pretty good. Like, and if they all went away, like, our bottom line doesn't really change. Right.
Exactly.
But the fact that those people are there creates a reputation for us as being the spot that's like super serious or whatever.
Yep.
Which is both good and bad, because that intimidates some people and they think that, that we like are, I don't even know what they think. I don't know.
Well, it's just a choice, right? Like, you guys have made a choice that you're going to work with those athletes. All the power to you. It comes with upside and downside.
Yeah.
And I think that if gym owners could just be more aware of that, they'll make better decisions, and because I know every gym owner out there's got 1 to 5 clients where they're like, ugh, I just don't know if they're good for us.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm sitting here telling you right now, unless you're on the deathbed of revenue, you got to get more clear with who you're working with. But if you have a thriving business and you've got a couple people, in a large audience, no worries. But if you're trying to grow something, you have to be so clear, because people need to understand what they're coming in for. And just think about, even think about websites now. I want to go to a website and feel like the website is for me if I'm going to buy a product. So if I go to a website and it's 100% female 85-year-olds, it's like, I'm probably not too fired up about that. But if it's 35-year-old guys who, for me, it's like, I want to learn more, be in shape, and, enjoy time with my friends, family, and at work, it's like, okay, I'm in the right spot. And so the imagery, the videos, the text, the colors, all of that is relevant to how you're going to grow a business or not. And I'm not trying to say that gym owners have to spend all their time doing branding, but you do have to understand what your branding means and what the market's perceiving you to be. Because you don't create your brand. The market tells you what your brand is. You can just try to influence what that market reaction is. Which I think that's the interesting point with what CrossFit's doing right now. It's like they built a brand off of forging elite fitness, and now they're saying it's not about forging elite fitness, and I'm saying that's so interesting. What are you?
Yeah.
And they can say that they're health, but I'm like, but don't you still do intense group fitness? How has that changed, and why should I think of you differently than forging elite fitness, which, by the way, was what I loved. That's what I loved about the thing, and I think a lot of gym owners love it, and they're trying to figure out what this new brand is going to be. And from any research or any experience that I've had, it's going to take a while to change what that brand perception is to the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think that conversation surrounding, creating a brand based upon one area and then trying to expand it or potentially change the vision of it. The one could look at that almost like the Tesla model of start super high end and then be able to use that to sort of like get the flywheel going and then be able to spread out to, more accessible models. But it's different in CrossFit's case, because the one positioning of forging elite fitness, sort of like we were just talking about, is potentially detrimental to making it more accessible to people.
Well, the interesting thing too is that Tesla, one, they're always 2 weeks away from bankruptcy somehow, like no matter what. I don't know how. And the other thing is they came out day one, like however many years ago, and they said, we're going to build an electric car for $35K. So even with the Roadster, however many years ago, they were saying, we're going to do
Here's our vision.
Exactly.
Whereas a lot of other automakers very clearly delineate, this is a luxury brand.
Yeah.
This is the non-luxury brand. We don't even want you to know that they're just all owned by the same company.
Exactly. Which, if you look at maybe like a Colgate Palmolive or a Johnson & Johnson or these consumer staple products, right? They have 70 brands. But they don't say Johnson & Johnson except for that little line item, on the back of a label. I get why they do that, because they want to be able to expand into new markets with new products and acquire companies that are growing, that they can just say, oh, our team and our knowledge is actually not in the specific brand. Our knowledge is in growing a number of brands. And so that's their business model. It's not the one product, it's the conglomerate of products. So CrossFit comes out and says, we are forging elite fitness. And now it's not that. And so it's just going to be very interesting to see how that's marketed to people who believe that's what they are. And as long as the term CrossFit Games exists, that's still going to be the marketing mechanism that new people come into contact with CrossFit with. So I just think that trying to say that you're not that is going to be very, very interesting, assuming that there are still the games and assuming that CrossFit Health is the big push that they want to make.
And it seems, at least from an outsider's perspective, that you went through something similar with OPEX and Big Dogs.
Yeah.
Right, where it's like, okay, we have all these freaks like doing crazy stuff, and we're also trying to potentially, certify and license gyms to offer personalized fitness and like help people, regain function and be healthy, and as James says, live long and prosper. And it's like, and then here's everyone who people know about who's affiliated with us just killing themselves day in, day out. Yep. Right. So I assume that some of that calculus in terms of splitting that out was based upon these types of concepts.
Exactly. I mean, to try to keep a potentially very long conversation a little bit shorter, it's exactly this. And so if we look at what the difference is, we can get very, very global and say that Big Dogs is remote coaching and OPEX is really about in-person coaching experience. If we get a little bit more granular, Big Dogs is certainly about the higher end functional fitness athlete remote, and then OPEX is coaching education and gym licensing. So the problem that we faced for both of the companies is that together there were economies of scale that we could get in terms of marketing and of course everything underneath one banner. However, it was actually limiting for both of the companies because people didn't recognize, so do I do this coaching education thing? Do I do this remote coaching thing? Oh my God, you guys have gyms too. Like what should I do here? And
interesting. Yeah.
And so
the flow of someone who
Yeah.
maybe not totally versed in the ecosystem is confusing to them.
Exactly. And as our marketing has gotten stronger over the years, as our conversations have gotten better, we're pushing more people to our website, we're pushing more people to our social media, and think of social media for us as if I post about somebody hitting that muscle up PR or something like that. And then I talk to an OPEX gym owner or potentially a prospective client in an OPEX gym, and we say, we coach you for health, and they go to our social media channel and they see that, they're like, nope, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And so we're not trying to say that you can't have athletes in OPEX gyms. We're just saying that the target market for an OPEX gym is the fitness enthusiast who wants to progress forever. So it's about the target market, and it's about the service that we offer. And we wanted to be much more specific about both of those so that both companies would have the best pathway to success. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a pain in the ass actually restructuring and doing all the work to get it out. And, both internally and externally, it was challenging to do it because we had to answer these questions 500 times. But, doing it again, I would definitely do it this way because I'm a huge believer in what we're talking about is you can't confuse the market at any point in the conversation now because social media is tribal. And if I send you to my social and you're confused, you're gone. And now I can't drive traffic to our website or anything like that.
On a more granular level, how much do you see social actually impacting? I guess maybe this. Maybe it depends on the specific area, right? I mean, do you see social as a driver for local OPEX gyms, or do you see it predominantly as a driver for potential coaches or gym owners entering the OPEX ecosystem of coaching certifications and licensing and all that?
I do see it as both. Let's go to the prospective gym clients. I'm a believer that social media today is better for visibility and initial interest, and then to nurture the people who are already watching your content. So to put one ad out and expect people are going to become your members is simply not going to happen anymore. You're going to either have to retarget multiple times to blog articles or whatever, or you're going to have to get them to like your page and provide them enough intriguing content for them to want to take the next step, go to your website, request a consult, whatever. It is very relevant though. And so for our gyms, we don't want them to forego being in person and building relationships at all. We actually think that that's probably more important than just some social media. But organic social media, i.e. unpaid, has to be consistent and high quality and of your brand. And then paid is better to drive visibility, which gets people starting the conversation about becoming interested. And then it's the consistency of that content. For coaching education on the OPEX side, and honestly for big dogs as well, social is very, very important because we're a global company that doesn't just operate inside of a gym. So we have to have conversations with people effectively, and social media is simply the best way to do it. So on a monthly basis for OPEX, for example, you almost always notice we put out a new piece of content, that is designed to get people to be interested in what that piece of content is, to give us an email. And then if we show them that we can provide them coaching value, now they step forward the conversation and go to the next step. If there wasn't social media, we'd probably do a lot more specifically in Google, et cetera. But the concept is that we're going down that buying journey, right? So I have to build awareness somewhere, and social media is the easiest, most accessible place to build awareness. And then from there, we've got 10 different ways that they can move through the rest of the funnel.
Yeah, my first impulse would be that based upon my experience, I think that social is not a fantastic channel for like a specific gym, and that if you think about the behavior of a social media user and the problem that they are trying to solve, as we were sort of talking about earlier, the problem they're trying to solve is like, I'm bored in line, yeah. Right? Or like I'm in bed in the morning and not ready to actually get out of bed. They're not necessarily like, I want to start a fitness program,
Well, I think the way that I might look at it though is, where are they consuming content? So no doubt about it, they might look on YouTube, they might go to news apps, they might go to Reddit, or they could just go to websites. But they're going to go for content somewhere. And as long as there are demographics of people for us, Instagram is just a better channel than Facebook. But as long as those folks that we know their demographic and psychographic are on those platforms, if we can start conversations with them, it's at least beneficial. I'm with you that I don't find social media to generally be a great converter to new clients. But I think it's a great place to start the conversation. I also would agree in terms of you have to have a website that is SEO friendly, so search engine optimization. And by that, I mean it has to be relevant to what people are searching for. I think that's a great mechanism to bring in consistent eyes to your website. And then, of course, the website has to do the next piece of heavy lifting, which is content into landing pages, into, request a consult or whatever. But I think our goal is to just get people where they are and serve them with content that's relevant for where they are in their overall buying journey. And social seems to be pretty effective to do that.
Yeah, I would guess that social would be much more effective for like global OPEX, meaning like the continuing education and licensing piece, in the sense that, I mean, like you mentioned before, it's people identify sort of tribally, and within, let's call it like the CrossFit space, quote unquote, right? I mean that there's a lot of different tribes that people have some affiliation with, and they recognize that, oh, if I, wear an OPEX shirt, or if I wear an Invictus shirt, or if I wear a Misfit shirt, or if I wear, whatever, that says something about me. Mm-hmm. And that social, I think, is a much better channel for sort of capitalizing on that type of thing.
For sure.
Right. Because then they can sort of say, oh, I can see the social proof related to, what this organization is doing and what they're saying about themselves, which in turn says something about me, should I choose to, go down the certification path or put on this t-shirt or whatever.
I think without a doubt, that's beneficial. Again, it's even if somebody's just doing the wake up and scroll, scenario in the morning, if you can put the right imagery, and specifically imagery, i.e. Instagram, the more people can see the quality of the brand, the more they're likely to either become a member or stay a member, just because, to your point, it's tribal. Like, people want to be a part of something. And I don't think that's going anywhere, whether it's local or global. People want to feel like they have a deeper meaning behind why they're doing what they're doing. Yeah,
and I think that it's certainly not going anywhere, and I think it's getting more extreme based upon.
Yeah, it sure seems to be.
Yeah. That's a totally interesting sort of like accidental result of these technologies.
Oh my gosh! I mean, well, it's funny that you say accidental. It's like it is and it isn't accidental, right? Because their business model says the more algorithmic movement we can tribalize them, the better we can monetize ad spend. So,
although I think the tribalizing is an accident as far as like that's what came out as being the most effective way to drive engagement.
For sure.
Right. That 15 years ago, sort of idealistically, technology entrepreneurs or whatever who are like, the more communication, the better. That will open up ideas and develop like cosmopolitanism and all that kind of stuff, which may be true for a certain subset of the population. Then the reality of it spreading to everyone is like, that's actually not the case. When you give people that type of platform or opportunity to just sort of like do whatever online, that they don't necessarily engage in, voracious learning and cosmopolitanism and like amazing, connection, right? And like whatever.
Well, I can't remember what the book is called, but former Google employee.
Tristan Harris.
Which one?
Tristan Harris.
Is that about what people search for?
Oh, no. Okay. Different one. Sorry. Yeah.
So shoot.
I know what you're talking about though. Yeah.
The whole concept is what is in reality being searched for on the internet, and almost always it comes back to sex and like what none of us would actually talk about out loud that we want to go see on the internet. And to your point, it's like we can talk about all the Audible books we're listening to and all, but at the end of the day, it's like I just kind of want to waste time. You know what I mean? And I think the vast population wants to do that. Just look at the bandwidth usage of Netflix in the evening. What is it now? 50 or 60% of the bandwidth of the internet is now Netflix at night?
That's fascinating.
I mean, unbelievable, right? I mean, that kind of statistic.
And the other 49% is porn.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And then there's 1% that's like people reading, long reads and blogs and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And I think that it's like we are dumb animals at the end of the day, right? And like for us to try and not be that at a core level, and obviously I know that we do get educated and but it's like people have base urges and now they have an easier mechanism, i.e. their cell phone, to get them. And I think it's fascinating to think about. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why social is just so big is because it's the easiest way to just to go kind of check out what's happening. And it's just interesting. It's like one big clickbait at the end of the day. It's like, oh, just one more scroll, I might see something super interesting. You know, and they're trying to build the feed structure to keep us scrolling. I mean, well, I guess I can't say that that's proven, but I think it's pretty well known that that's what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, and sort of based upon that, I think one thing that's very interesting about it is that there almost seems to be like an attention. I don't know what the right way to phrase it is. Sort of like divergence as far as some percentage of people are utilizing the internet, you know, sort of like for all these fantastic properties of self-education and like really developing their skills and learning all this stuff and taking college courses on YouTube and listening to hours of podcasts of some of the most intelligent people in the world discussing ideas and all this kind of stuff, right? And that there's this percentage of self-motivated learners who are kind of pushing themselves even further away from other people as far as like the content that they're taking in on a consistent basis. And then for a bunch of other people, it's kind of this thing that causes them to not take action on stuff, right? That they end up caught in like YouTube loops and stuff like that that aren't necessarily helpful. And it almost exacerbates that impulse in either direction, where it's like, if you are motivated and you do want to learn and you do want to take in information and content to better yourself, like you have this unbelievable resource.
Oh my gosh.
And if you don't, and if you want to waste time and, you know, look at conspiracy theories online, it's like you can
all day long. I mean, I think in a quick story that I just blew my mind, because you hear this type of stuff, but I got signed out of Gmail or something like that one time. And when I signed back in to YouTube, it must have been with a different Gmail address. So I had a feed that was completely random. And I remember just looking at that feed, I'm like, I have no interest. Immediately, no interest, and I shut down YouTube. And I probably didn't look at YouTube for weeks, if not months after that, just because I was like, I don't want that. But then you see how easy it is when you're like, oh, I'm one click from YouTube on my phone to see something interesting. And by the way, that interesting thing might be educational or it might be whatever, you know, but I think that so many people are just completely unaware of tendencies and how much time they're truly spending on the screen. You know, and I'd like to consider myself somebody who's more on the end of wanting to continue to be educated, but nobody is I can't think of the word, but nobody is safe from from just scrolling for hours and hours. Safe. But similar to your point on social media, it's like, if I can go after that group of people who show an affinity for fitness and education and growth, that's exactly who I want in an OPEX gym. Exactly. So if I can go target them with the right audience, capabilities, that's what we want.
Yeah, I think that it might be, is it Tyler Cowen who uses the term Infovore? I think that maybe comes from him. I don't know if you're familiar with...
Like the Alex Jones Infowar?
Infovore.
Oh,
not
okay.
Infowars.
Like, that's a different idea.
Yeah, Infowars. Yeah, figure we'll just let's watch some Infowars videos for the remainder of this podcast. Sounds great. Tyler Cowen is a Georgia Mason economist with a prominent blog called Marginal Revolution. That's super good and very interesting. And I think that he's used the term Infovore to effectively describe someone that is kind of self-motivated to search out like just constant new information and pulling on threads of stuff like, oh, okay, I like this author, like who's their favorite author? Oh, it's this one, great, I'll read this. Oh, they mentioned this research paper, let me go find it online and download the PDF. And oh, okay, this person was on a podcast, so I'll find that. And they just kind of like get in this feedback loop of just constantly taking in new information. And that potentially, to your point, that if you are able to just like any other sort of like tribe or demographic, target those individuals with something that does appeal to that tendency for them, that and that is someone who you potentially want to either be a client of an OPEX gym or potentially a licensee of an OPEX gym. That's a little
exactly. I mean, and let's just a slightly divergent audience, because I think that like this term biohacking is potentially destructive for a lot of people, But look at like a Tim Ferriss audience, right? Like, he has built a category on this idea of searching out the latest and greatest information, of biohacking, of talking to really smart people. It's like he was really a big forefront person in that. And that's now his brand, so it's like if he were to try to change that, it just gets confusing for folks. But if at a local gym level, if you can build a really, really good product that is clearly defined to your audience, as long as you keep talking to your audience about that, you will attract people. It's when you aren't clear to your audience or you aren't clear on your audience, that's where you just kind of just either survive or just die.
So with specific OPEX gyms, something that I'd be curious about is related to, we were talking about this concept of generating leads and bringing in new clients and sort of having a position in the marketplace. Since you are effectively giving almost like an operating system to a lot of different people, how do you figure out what are the actual principles and practices that are universally applicable and which ones maybe are not, or are not proven enough to sort of roll out, or are not good enough for all the gyms to sort of take part in?
When we first rolled this, keep in mind, it was kind of James and I trying to figure this all out, kind of on our own, in the beginning of the content of it.
And I assume you probably had people effectively asking for something like this, right?
People have been asking us for years.
Yeah, you guys weren't just like, okay, like here's an idea, right? It's like these people are like, can I be an OPEX gym? Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, this was based on demand more than anything, and also just to continue to build a life cycle for a coach, right? Like even to this day, and I don't see this changing for us, we're not going after the huge money investor for a franchise. We're going after the coach who wants to have a long-term career and coach people in a creative, personalized way. When we first started doing this though, I wrote like a 200-page book basically on how to run a gym. And I showed it to James. He's like, yep, that makes sense. And then we got 5 gyms to do a beta test back in 2016. And we decided to do a call to kick it off, and we were going to do like a couple of calls. After the first call, I walk into James's office and I go, there's no chance that we can not have calls for this thing, because there's no way that we can articulate how to get this thing off the ground by just giving somebody a book. Yeah. There's just no way. So we ended up doing a 6-month, every week we had a call, and that's the way that we ran the program for the first 2 years. And it was, I'd say pretty successful with the way that we did it. We expanded the content as we went. We learned from what worked and what didn't. And then, actually, it's funny timing. 2 months ago, we released the most up-to-date version, and now we actually do have a really robust education digitally through videos as a starting point, and then we go on to the what we now call the launch calls. That gets everybody to approximately the same place when they get to the launch calls. And at that point, it's all about how they are specifically implementing all of these things. So at this moment, now when we go to a gym and we say, what are you doing for marketing? They would have gotten all the content. They would have known exactly what they're supposed to implement, and they would have shown it they have to video this stuff for us, and they also have to walk through all their process docs on how they're going to run it. So it's really robust in terms of what they have to produce in order to say, I get it at the end of the day. And then everybody gets a one-to-one mentor when they finish those launch calls. So, okay, you're not quite where you want to be. You better work hard with your mentor to make sure that you're building the procedures that you need to have. And don't get me wrong, it hasn't worked for everybody. But for the most part, when people execute on this stuff, it works really effectively because principles work. So I can't tell an audience, let's just say in inner city Chicago, right? Like I can't tell you exactly the message that you have to put out. That's completely unrealistic based on your target market, but I can certainly tell you how to go research your target market, how to research your market size, how to research the message that you need, and then how to put that into play from a website, social media, email follow-up, service level, etc. basis. And that's, I think, where the power of how we are actually scaling out a personalized fitness model is coming, is they get to the licensing program with an understanding of the coaching side, and then we really, really go into the business side. But don't get me wrong, our brand's going to have to continue to grow, because for efficiency and visibility for OPEX gyms to make it even less expensive, to acquire clients, people are going to just need to start walking through the doors. But that's going to take time, and all of our gym owners know that. So, to more specifically, we're refining that content all the time. We're trying to lay it out very specifically in process docs, and they then have to prove that they are implementing it. And then after the fact, they go to the one-to-one mentor and ongoing calls with us to ensure that they're implementing it.
Yeah, sure. And I think based upon those concepts of having these documented processes, et cetera, so I often think of the fitness business being something like the restaurant business. Right.
Yeah,
and I don't know much about the restaurant business, so some of this is potentially false. But, you have this very challenging business with a bunch of amateur capital in it, a bunch of people who are doing it as a passion project, who don't actually know what's going on, potentially like a variety of, eccentric, charismatic chefs or coaches who have like their special sauce or whatever and don't necessarily have an interest in actually knowing how to operate a business. And, it's just tough based upon all of these factors. And what I think is really interesting about what you guys are trying to do is that, through this licensing process, you're trying to give people sort of like like you said, like an operating manual of like, hey, here's how you do all these business things. But if you take, say, the restaurant business, once something becomes like a chain or whatever, right, it's very clearly things have to get standardized to a level where it's no longer the thing that people like. Yep. Right. That it's like, I don't want to go to some stupid like mall ass place that, like is all corny. Like I want like the real thing or whatever. Right. But obviously through scaling it, you have to have some standardization. And in order to even offer a license, you have to have some sort of standardization. So how do you find that balance to give people, the manual on how to do this thing without sort of taking away that, that individual like special sauce that people are potentially offering as a coach?
Yeah, and actually I did a license call this morning and we talked about specific processes of running the gym for client experience. And I think that's a good example that people could latch on to for how we really do this thing. Everybody that comes into an OPEX gym has a one-to-one coach. So instantaneously, there is going to be a level of creativity that coach is going to have to show in the program design, in the nourishment, in consultations, so sit-down conversations with people. That has to have creativity because you don't know what the conversation is going to go, what it's going to look like. What we do is we standardize the process, right? So if I want to have a monthly client experience, I'm going to have certain places that need to be locked and loaded and very, very consistent. So for us in an OPEX gym, I need to make sure people have a monthly consultation. So I want to automate the process of getting people to the consultation, i.e. setting up, links and to get people to that consultation. I want to also make sure that in the consultation, our coaches have a long-term game plan and process to ask good questions to continue to build the coaching relationship to people. Now, I can't tell them that month 3 needs to open up with question A, right? Like that's unrealistic. But they know what the process of doing that consultation looks like. From the floor experience, I want them, and for an OPEX gym, there's six touch points of where a coach could interact with a client. They have to interact with them at 3 very specific places. But if they don't get 6, that's okay based on the number of people in the gym. But if they can get 6, they know where to get them. And so I want clients to walk in and know exactly where they need to go with no questions. I want them to understand exactly how they write their workouts down. I want them to be on the floor training, but I want the floor coach to manage that floor coach in a very specific way. But the program that they're getting is completely personalized. So there is still that level of autonomy, if you will, for the coach, but the process has got to be locked in. And then when they are writing programs, what we're really trying to help the coach the most with at the end of the day right now is being efficient with how they're designing the programs. And that's not to say that they're templating them. That's just to say that they have to think through what can I do to drop 2 minutes per program design, not to make it less good, but to just not overthink it so that 2 minutes times 40 clients times 4 weeks a month, that averages out to be however many hours that I'm saving so that I can either relax or I can go out and go market for more people. Because one of the biggest challenges that we face is that we have to program for all of our clients, and that takes time. So we need to develop efficiencies because that's a big priority of longevity for these coaches. And like you asked before, that's just getting refined and refined and refined and refined as long as the brand continues to be personalized and not templated. So we maintain willingness to pay, the better personalization we can have, but I see no reason not to design the process to make sure that that's what's delivered.
Yeah, that you're essentially creating a scenario in which the coach is able to maximize their own creativity as a coach and their ability to connect with clients by not having to worry about how to design their intake process or whatever.
Exactly. And where we can, and it's getting just more and more robust, we give them those actual emails or intake forms, or like we give them these process docs and we say, don't just take our word for it, walk through this whole process, make it your own in, certain ways based on how your facility is laid out, etc., and use that process because it fits exactly with your facility, your coaching system, but you know that it's come from a well thought out place of this works.
Yeah. And that, anything like this always runs into the same issues of how much do you sort of like have a top down, here's how you do it. We're explaining to you the exact ways, and these are the ways that it must be followed, versus how much do you let kind of like a bottoms up emergence occur from people on the ground kind of figuring stuff out. And there's almost never like one answer, right? It's usually, it's a combination of the two aspects of creating the top down guidelines that then facilitate the bottoms up emergence of like a great product.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we listen to our gym owners all the time because they often have really good ideas that we want to implement into our gyms. I think, some people might have the perception that it's bad if it's coming top down. It's like they might lose autonomy. I've actually found it's very different, where they want the quote unquote answer or the packet or the email or the marketing sequence when it is not directly associated to them coaching a client. They want to have creativity as a coach, and they might want to have a little creativity in some of their organic social media. Outside of that, they just want to be given this stuff, and I would too, because it's more efficient and it's better designed because we've got professional graphic designers in the whole 9 yards. And so we started out giving them less, thinking that was better, and that actually isn't better. So now we're giving them more, not to lock them in, but to be more effective at how they're acquiring and then retaining clients.
Yeah, I think that a lot of small business owners, particularly in an area like coaching that in and of itself is kind of like almost like an artisanal task that people develop an appreciation for and potentially a mastery of, is that, you get into business to do your skill set.
Yes.
And then at some point you're like, the only way this business can exist is if I stop doing my skill set and spend my time, essentially marketing, managing, and designing processes.
Yep. And don't get me wrong, that's still challenging in an OPEX gym, right? Because we're not implementing these things for them. Certainly we're trying to give them more tangible resources as we go. But I've always loved the Tony Robbins bit where it's like you're either an artist, a manager, or an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And so the coach is the classic artist where they want to be in front of the client. They want to be designing this experience, and that's wonderful. However, if you don't have some sort of management processes in place and standard operating procedures, you can't be consistent enough to continuously grow. And if you don't have some entrepreneurial spirit and take on a little bit of risk and kind of go for it, you're not going to be able to kind of reach much bigger levels. And so that's what I think that you're spot on. It's too many coaches fall into the artist and are either unwilling to do the management side of it, or they simply can't wrap their head around it.
Yeah. And that there's potentially, especially for a lot of coaches who may have gotten into the coaching business in order to get out of, like a sort of standard 9-to-5 type of situation. It's like, oh, I can't do this anymore or whatever. Right? I mean, for you, you're like, I can't deal with a hedge fund anymore. Like I need to just coach, that sort of, that transition into like, oh, I have to like run this like a real thing is potentially emotionally loaded as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, and I've seen it in OPEX. I've seen it outside of OPEX. it's going to continue to exist for sure. I mean, I think that, because a lot of our lens, right, comes from CrossFit, because we saw that in such a big way and continue to see that in such a big way. And if you look at it, right, well, what did it take to open a CrossFit gym in 2005? A garage and 4K and old equipment, right? Now,
a basketball and some sand from Home Depot.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And now many CrossFit gyms are well over 100K, because you're in, most of these gyms are opening up in bigger spaces with more equipment, and it's now Rogue outfitted and the whole 9 yards. And it's also in an environment, particularly in the United States, that's not growing. So you're not on the coattails anymore. So you're going to have to be better than everybody else. Like, I'm going to say it outright. Like, I got in 2010 and out in 2014. I caught the fucking trend, right? Like, and that was partially by design, capitalism, right? Like, I saw this thing going and I was like, this is really interesting, and I need no certifications to open up, and I can run this thing for a little bit and then see how it goes at a fairly low investment. Sounds good. And I want to say that my business partner and I probably only put in 35 or 40 grand to open this thing, and then just grew it organically like a weed and had a lot of success. Now in the United States, at least based on the data that I'm seeing, the number of gyms isn't growing. So if the number of gyms isn't going up, that means that you're not going to have as many people just walking in, because this explosion has peaked perhaps. Now maybe it goes again, I'm not sure. But I think that people need to recognize that you're going to have to be better on the business side, not on the coaching side.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you and I have our belief system in effectiveness in coaching and not hurting people in the whole 9 yards. But you're going to have to win on the business side or else this $100,000 investment, like, people forget, it's not just about making $1,000 a month. It's about covering the damn investment and making money back on it, because the moment that you put your equipment on the floor, it gets cut in half in price.
Right. Yeah. You better be profiting by $5,000 to $10,000 a month to take your debt down.
For sure. And not enough gym owners, and I still see it in some of the OPEX gym owners who are coming in as well, and we're trying to negotiate this with them before they become gyms. They're not looking at the buy-in cost of opening a gym, as well as the first 6 to 12 months of potential more burn, i.e. more cost that's going to go out in cash. They're just saying, I've got 15K, let's rock and roll. And that worked in 2005 when you were in a garage with 4K of equipment and you pay no rent.
Yeah.
But now these gyms are opening up and they're paying large sums of money for rent, and they have no real network in the city. And so it's going to take them potentially, and I don't know, and everybody's different, but it might take them 6 months to get, maybe to break even.
Yeah, to stop the burn. And even that's like a pretty, depending on where you are, that's pretty fast.
So to my understanding,
because to your point earlier, if you're going to get to break even in 6 months, like,
you're rolling.
Yeah. And you've somehow clawed your way into a market that's probably already saturated, that already has some serious players who probably are quote unquote winning, and in some cases those people are winning by default, and they are potentially vulnerable to competition who comes in and knows what they're doing. But in other cases, especially now, like, the people who are winning might be winning because they actually know what's going on.
Exactly. They're still in the game. Now, you might still have some gyms that are doing it as a hobby, right? Like, they have a different job, or they got 16 owners, right? Like, to your point on the restaurant, they don't need to make a profit. That's still out there in this industry. But the gyms that are thriving, they are working on the business side in a big, big way. And so I think that many gym owners need to take a serious look at the numbers and say, what is this really going to take for me to open up and do what I need to do? I mean, for example, we're having OPEX gyms go into, like, we want them in like 2,000 to 3,000 square feet max. Not only because there's way more real estate at that size, but it's a far more realistic investment for them on a build-out standpoint to buy equipment, and they can still put in 150 people, which is what we want. But why do we want 150? Because that's tribal. The moment you go over 150, you stop being able to be quite as tribal, and then so it's like we want to maximize our model for what we can maximize for. Some things that we can't maximize for, we won't maximize dollars per square foot like yoga, right? Because they're going to have dumbbells. You're right. So you can't do that. So we need to win on retention and willingness to pay. That's what we'll win at an OPEX gym. An Orange Theory can do pretty big volume at a pretty high price, and that works really well. Soul Cycle can do big volume at a pretty good price, but they're generally in super expensive rent districts, right? So in OPEX Gym, I'm just being honest, like I can't open an OPEX Gym in Manhattan for $25K a month right now.
Yeah.
We don't have the brand for it yet.
Yeah.
So I would never tell a gym owner to go do that. And I think that some CrossFit gym owners who aren't prepared for that are unfortunately in a problem spot right now. If they're prepared for it, hey, it's like if you're good at business and you're a good coach, it's still a viable business, man. So I just think that people need to think about both sides.
Yeah, and that the that concept surrounding, the 150 number, right? Dunbar's number, quote unquote, which I think it's thrown around a lot in a way that can be a little bit misleading. But I would say that from my sort of like anecdotal experience of running a gym and being part of gyms and all that kind of stuff, that the way that you have to operate to have more than that number of people in one spot is totally different.
Yeah.
That you have to really level up what you're doing as far as like the way you manage people and like the types of drama and issues that can show up and the way that cliques form and people don't like each other, and like that starts to happen. And if you're not prepared to deal with that, and that starts to take over a huge amount of your bandwidth, which you potentially be spent coaching and all that kind of stuff, is like actually building these systems and creating ways to actually unite and organize this large group of people that doesn't kind of spontaneously do it on its own is a totally different challenge.
Well, to your earlier point, that starts looking like localized scale, right? So at 150, you can get away with more autonomy. At 350, you can't in one building.
Yeah, and at 152, people give you the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Right? Like your clients are like, oh yeah, cool. Like Jim's working hard.
Yeah, exactly.
At 250, they're like, why isn't there fucking toilet paper?
Yeah.
Well, if there's no toilet paper, I guess that's fair to be mad about. Fair. But maybe something less extreme where it's like, whoa, okay. Like, whoa, what happened there? Yeah.
And, to your point too, it's, what you start
to see. Why isn't there athletic tape? That's a good one.
Oh yeah, that is a good one. What you start to see, I think, is the problems become magnified.
Yeah.
So, at 100,
any weak link starts to get stretched really hard.
Exactly. And so, not only do you just have more people who could bitch about things, but the word travels fast in local gyms, right? And so, you have to be prepared for the more number of clients, the faster the word's going to spread. And so, it can feel extremely fast when something goes haywire. And that's why I think that, to be prepared for that, you have to put these systems in when you have 0 clients. Yeah. Because, like, let's say, for example, you don't have a schedule when people have to come in a gym. And then all of a sudden you're at 200 people and you're like, we're full and we have to turn people away. Making that change at 200 people is disgusting.
Everyone's mad. Yeah, everyone's mad.
Yeah, so if you can put as much of that in early as possible, you will bring in the people who will respect that, and the system will grow much more naturally. And I made plenty of mistakes there, so I know it all too well. But if you don't do that, man, it can be really chaotic.
Yeah, it's much harder to. If you ever do anything that feels like you're taking something away from someone, they are not happy about that.
Correct. Yeah,
and requiring people to sign in is essentially taking away the freedom of them being able to come when they want to.
Exactly, and that's where I go back to how you're communicating and the exact words that you're using. Every year that I just do any work, I realize how important how you say things are, and something like that. The perception can be 180 degrees different just on the words you use or the body language that you have, or maybe you ask them what they think about it or don't. So just all these pieces where at a large number of clients, a lot more things can go wrong.
Yeah, no, that's real. All right, man, that's a little over an hour of business chatter.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a good chatter. So you're on social media, huh? You're a social man. What's the deal?
Yeah.
Where can people learn more about you and OPEX?
Yep. So we're just opexfit.com and opexgyms.com.
What lead magnet should they download?
They should download the Coach's Toolkit.
Great.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm just Jim Crowell on social for Instagram, LinkedIn. My biggest platform actually at this point is turning into LinkedIn.
Cool.
It's an interesting platform, but Instagram's still the best for gyms as far as what I see.
There you go. Great.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me.
It was a delightful chatter. Thanks for listening all the way through. I admire your grit, your persistence, and your perseverance. Since you made it, I have a few favors to ask of you. Go ahead and open up the show notes on whatever podcast player you use. In there, you'll find links to all the resources that were mentioned throughout the show. There's also some links there in which you can leave a review or subscribe to the show. And podcasters are always harping on this because this actually makes a difference in terms of the algorithms that recommend podcasts to new people. So if you do that, it helps more people find the show. And if you head over to toddneef.com, you can sign up to receive most of my thoughts and writing, which really only go out to the email list. A lot of it never makes it to the blog or the podcast. So if you like what I have to say and you want to see some of my recommendations and stuff that I've been checking out, go ahead and subscribe to that email newsletter as well.